In today's show, Joe Cronin gets a contract extension from the Trail Blazers, and we talk about his job as the Trail Blazers GM to date and what lies ahead for him as the team's lead decision maker. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trail Blazers, your daily Portland Trail Blazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trail Blazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's program, we're talking about Joe Cronin, taking stock of his tenure as the Blazers GM. It was announced today by the team that Joe Cronin agreed to a multi-year contract extension. He's sticking around. On the strength of the best 12-month stretch of the Cronin tenure, the Blazers decide to extend their lead basketball decision maker, and now he will guide them out of the rebuild and into hopefully just what they call building at some point here in the very near future. But the challenges, there are still major challenges ahead for Cronin. I think the hardest part of his job is actually what's out on the horizon, not what's hit behind him. But in today's program, I want to talk about what is behind him. We'll talk a little bit about the sort of full scope of Cronin's tenure since he took over in an interim role in 2021 and then was promoted to the full-time job, the big chair in 2022. The bumps along the way, the things that he's gotten right, and particularly his recent success. Much of the reason why he got extended today, and it was announced by the team, this multi-year extension, they did not disclose the terms. None of the reporters around the team have had they didn't disclose the terms either. Shams Charania, who initially reported the story before the Blazers of ESPN, did not disclose those terms either because that's not the kind of thing Shams does. He doesn't care about details. He just wants headlines. In any case, maybe at one point we'll find out kind of the deal with how long Cronin is around. To be totally clear, I didn't even attempt to do any reporting. I was at my day job. I didn't make any phone calls, send any text messages, send any emails. So that one's on me. In any case, what the Blazers announced as a multi-year extension. And the reason that Cronin got a multi-year extension is because this has been the best stretch of his run, of his tenure, right? He took over in 2021. Neil Olshey gets fired. Joe Cronin is promoted in an interim basis and then eventually gets promoted to the full-time job and begins a tear down, quite frankly. I know it started with giving Damian Lillard a big contract, but it was, for my money, very obviously a tear down from the moment Joe Cronin really got control. We'll talk about that, and because a huge part of Joe Cronin's legacy is that he made the biggest trade, or one of the biggest trades with respect to Clyde Drexler, one of the biggest trades in franchise history, right? A massive one with Damian Lillard. Huge part of Cronin's legacy, absolutely, maybe the defining moment of it, certainly to this point, the defining moment of his career. You hope, if you're Joe Cronin, it ain't the defining moment of your career, because you hope the things that come next are the thing that define you. That's why I'm hedging a little bit. But the reason that he got this contract extension is because they've had such success over the last 12 months. I want to be totally upfront here. I have been plenty critical of Joe Cronin on this podcast. Plenty critical. Heck, the last show I recorded, I mentioned how I just didn't understand what the Blazers did last weekend. I don't get it. I don't get it, right? And Cronin is certainly at the top of, he's in the big chair. He's the lead decision maker. So when they do something that puzzles me, an unimportant podcaster, that's maybe not part of his legacy, but he's involved in that, right? I've been plenty critical of him here. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm someone who's always sung his praises. I do think in general, there's like the way the internet works is like there's a section of the internet that thinks Joe Cronin is like the worst GM and the stupidest person alive. And those people are wrong. And there's a section of the internet that thinks Joe Cronin is the savior of the franchise and one of the great GMs and builders of in the history of the sport. And those people are wrong too, because it's always in the middle. It's the polls, particularly just like in the digital age, the polls are wrong. Like that's POLE. Like you folks on either end of the spectrum, you're both incorrect in your own special ways. The truth is in the middle. He's done some good stuff and some bad stuff, but I think over the last 12 months, it's mostly been good. Part of that is his draft picks, right? Cronin has made three top 7 picks, twice at 7 with Shaedon Sharpe and Donovan Clingan. In the middle, he picked at 3 with Scoot Henderson. And the lottery picks have shown some promise. Shaedon Sharpe had some moments his rookie season and then kind of had a lost year 2. And in year 3, there's been some peaks and valleys like with any young player, but in general, you're starting to see the best version of Shaedon Sharpe we've seen. Maybe like the last 2 games haven't been ideal, but I would say the last stretch of basketball he's played is like you're starting to see like, oh yeah, he's putting stuff together, he's making progress. Scoot Henderson, like obviously the year 1 was so low for Scoot that the graph had to go up because that was pretty much the only way it could go. But I think Scoot has shown real signs in year 2. Just like for me personally, I think he's moved from a guy who I'm like, oh man, how is he going to stick in this league to being like, yeah, he's going to be an NBA starter. Like, I don't know beyond that, whatever, but like I have real confidence that Scoot ends up being a long-term NBA starter now. And certainly you can be a lot more because it's his second season in the league as a 21-year-old, right? But I think year 1 was rocky enough that it was like he needed to show progress, and he certainly did. And obviously he's still got plenty of things to grow with, but I think Scoot has been enough better in year 2 to make you feel comfortable that like, if this is what he played like his rookie season, no one would be freaking out. It's just he didn't play like that his rookie season. He really struggled, and the idea was that he was going to be further along because he had played some professional basketball. And Clingan, the last of the lottery picks in order, like even with Klingan's obvious warts on offense, it looks good. He looks like he could be a long-term starter, and like in the league, like he really can defend. He understands his strengths. He's gigantic and he knows it. In a lot of ways, when you're picking at 7, what you're hoping is like, obviously you're always hoping to land a star, an all-star, but like a realistic expectation is like, can you get a starter? Can you get a long-term starter at this spot? And like Shaedon Sharpe looks like that. I think Clingan looks like that. Scoot, at 3, maybe your expectations are hopefully a little bit higher, hopes are a little bit higher, and I don't think Scoot has exceeded any of those guys in terms of like overall trajectory, but certainly he looks solid. And the Blazers have been solid. In fact, since the calendar flip, the Blazers have been like just pretty competent. Obviously the like schedule has been soft and they've played some good teams resting their guys, but you really just can't fake the funk for as long as they have. Like maybe you have some questions about their overall ceiling, and I think that's fair, but like the defense has been competent and good enough for long enough, like a defense that's been flirting with top 5 and maybe slipped a little bit out of that recently, but like flirting with one of the 5 best defenses in the league for almost half the season, that's real progress, right? And I will say that I'm going to talk about the trades, right? I'm going to talk about Danny and talk about Tumani here in a second, because that's a huge part of what Cronin has done, and those 2 dudes are the best players on the team this year. You trade for your 2 best players. That's a big part of it. But I think briefly here for a moment before we pivot to them, because I want to give them their due. There was a time this season when I mentioned I would use the phrase organizational alignment, and I would say like I felt like Chauncey Billups was trying to do things that weren't necessarily aligned with the organization. He's trying to win games when it felt like that wasn't in the organization's maybe best interest, or even like interest period, right? Like maybe not like what the plan was. And then I mentioned on a program that I had talked with people in and around the organization that I probably misattributed that to Chauncey, that was larger, right? That it was beyond Chauncey, that extended above him and to the front office, and that like there were multiple people within the Blazer organization that decided we would want to win games. And I think mapping from where we are now, backtracking to January, we're in the, this is April 8th's program, but shout out to those of you who made it. We're in Masters Week. in any case, like from April to back to middle of January, like when they started to win in earnest and look like a competent basketball team, from there to here, do you know how you show your bosses that you made progress? It's tangible results in any job you have, right? If you want a raise or a promotion or a contract extension in this case, showing your boss that you had tangible results on the court, that the things and the decisions you've made and the work you've done is paying off, that is how you get promoted. That's how you get a raise. That's how you get a contract extension in literally any line of work. And so why I said like a couple weeks ago that I think this was like maybe the interest in winning extended much further than just Chauncey Billups, and that I misattributed that particular interest to Billups based on some conversations that I've had in and around the organization. Like, yeah, you don't need to be a genius with to be able to see the roadmap from team starts to win more games, executive gets a new contract extension, right? Like, this is how you demonstrate to your bosses they did well. And also, like, the point of a basketball team is to win. Albeit maybe something that I thought they did too much of this year, but like when you improve a team by making decisions to upgrade the roster in various ways, and then that team is improved and they show it by winning basketball games, that's kind of the point of the job. And part of the reason they won basketball games is because over the last 12 months or more, essentially 2 years now, Cronin has nailed some trades. In addition to his lottery picks, who've shown some promise and shown like, yeah, these draft picks are not troubling like they may have looked like at one point. Like, these are, not the homiest of home runs, but like you've got some dudes here. Cronin's nailed some trades. Tumani is a nailed trade. Denny Avdia is a nailed trade. Let's talk about that in the second segment and the general sort of bigger picture on Cronin's legacy. Join me in that second segment, won't you? First, though, let's talk about Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get a 4% APY in your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month from 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. All right. The draft picks have been pretty good for Joe Cronin, but really the signature moves of his last couple seasons have been the way he pivoted off of Damian Lillard, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. But the pivot off Damian Lillard, including a trade with the Phoenix Suns, and now many of my listeners, maybe not many, but a dozen listeners have pointed out that there's a world in which the Blazers could have completed the deal they made with the Suns without doing the Damian Lillard part of the trade. And that might be true, y'all, but that's not what happened. In reality, that was part of the deal. And part of that deal included acquiring DeAndre Ayton and acquiring Tumani Camara. And if you are a DeAndre Ayton believer, supporter, whatever it is, then you gotta love this trade. But even if you're a Ayton doubter, right? Like even if you doubt his overall impact, Tumani Camara has been good enough in and of himself to really feel like the trade was a hit, because Kamara is a high-level defensive player. He is a dude who would play on any team in the league. He's improved on offense in his second season. Like the dude, he's like this type of stud, versatile 3-and-D wing, shooting above league average from three and upping his volume and showing a little more stuff off the bounce and a little more passing chops. And he's blossoms into an elite defender. That alone from the Damian Lillard trade is like, yeah, that's pretty fun. But not only did they do that, but like the sort of the back half of the trade, if you believe in the transitive property of deals, which I think I don't subscribe to this, but I do think this, even if you view it as a separate trade, some parts that Cronin got from the Damian Lillard trade, Malcolm Brogdon and a couple draft picks, he used to acquire Deni Avdija, who's been the Blazers' best player this year. At the time of the Avdija trade, I personally was pretty skeptical of the way the deal was put together. Not Deni himself. Like, you can go back and listen to the tapes. It was not that I was a big doubter of Deni. I wasn't like, he sucks and isn't worth it. What I said was, I'm surprised that I wasn't even surprised at the asking price for Avdija. I was surprised that the Blazers were the team that paid that price. Because at the time, I thought it was a weird deal for the Blazers in the position they were in to be sending out multiple first-round draft picks in exchange for a young player. I thought that was weird, right? I was like, from my point of view, at the time it went down, it's like, why are the Blazers the team sending out multiple draft picks when another type of bottom of the league team in Washington is acquiring talent or acquiring assets, right? Like sending out some young talent to acquire assets. Like, this is weird, right? Two teams in the same sort of end of the competition spectrum, but like doing different things in the way that they are going about the acquisition process. But even if I think it's weird, and I did at the time, it's undeniable that Deni's been awesome. And certainly better than I thought he would be. He's having the best season of his career, and post All-Star break, Deni has been awesome, All-Star level good. And while I can quibble, and I will in a moment, with some of the moves that Cronin has made along the way, it's undeniable that his draft picks, his signature lottery picks have been shown some promise this year. And the trades he has made, and particularly acquiring Toumani Camara from the Suns and acquiring Deni Avdija from the Wizards, you're starting to see the outline of the Blazers' core constructed by him. And that's why you get rewarded with a new contract, right? Like, he's built this thing, and all of a sudden they're winning games. Obviously, they made this push to the play-in and then short-circuited on Friday nights against the Bulls. But the just like the year-over-year winning improvement, the improvement on defense, a roster that has a clear vision, right? They want to be long. They're like, length and athleticism is a priority for this team. They're pretty much, they've gone are the days of playing particularly small, and certainly on the days of Norman Powell as your small forward every night with Anthony Simons also coming off the bench. You never get big at any point, right? Like the sort of Cronin's vision is coming into clear picture. But part of the Cronin story is trading Damian Lillard. That's part of this. That's the signature move, is not only navigating out of that trade, but is navigating into it as well. And for my money, the moment Joe Cronin took over, he wanted to tear this thing down. And the moves that he made walking through the following year, I guess year and a half really, but basically the final year of the decision to select Shaedon Sharpe in the 22 draft after Cronin got the job was the nail in the coffin. That's when it really ended, because Dame was really, really, I don't know, insistent is the right word, but I'll use it. He was insistent that the Blazers deal that number 7 pick for veteran help, right? And one of the teams that Blazers were talking with and often was the Toronto Raptors, and pursuit of OG Anunoby, who obviously would have really helped. But the Blazers didn't do that. They didn't make a trade for lottery help, right? And they not only drafted at 7, they drafted a 19-year-old who never played college basketball, right? Shaedon Sharpe might be the right pick. He might end up awesome. But the moment you do that was the moment the Damian Lillard era ended. Anyone telling you differently is lying to themselves. Now, there were some side quests along the way, like acquiring Jeremy Grant, but Cronin always moved to tear this thing down. He was always going to make the pick that ended up being Scoot Henderson, and it wasn't about Scoot necessarily. It was about just making the selection itself. He was always going to do that, and when he did that, it really officially became over. And then when that summer, when Joe gave Jeremy Grant a massive contract for fear of maybe losing him for walking. And I will say this, anyone out there thinking that the Jeremy Grant contract was related to Damian Lillard, you're lying to yourself. That's not how the timeline works. Damian Lillard met with Joe Cronin earlier that week. That was like on a Tuesday or a Monday. Jeremy Grant agreed verbally to that contract on a Friday. Damian Lillard asked out on a Saturday. What do you think they talked about in that meeting on Monday or Tuesday? He had plenty of warning that this thing was coming to an end. Sign Jeremy Grant to that big deal, knowing that you're almost certainly going to lose Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard asked for this big trade. I guess he didn't ask for a big trade. He asked for a very specific trade, very narrow, very small trade. Trade me to the Miami Heat right now. And Cronin didn't do it. And he probably did a good job not doing that. I'm probably not as high on the sort of overall haul of as some, but certainly not immediately giving in and just sending Damian Lillard to the exact place he wanted to go for a package that probably would have been generally less appealing is good business. But Cronin part of his legacy is that he, ran Damian Lillard out of town is too much, but that he made decisions on his watch that led to Damian Lillard asking out. And for some fans, I think that is too far, right? That makes Cronin a villain, persona non grata, all these things, right? And I think your way of fanning is that's your prerogative. I won't ever tell you how to be a fan. I'll be maybe annoyed with the way you are a fan, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it. But I think he did a good job navigating out of the Damian Lillard stuff. I think the package ended up good, and if you look at the back end of it, Tumani and Denny seemed like a big part of the Blazers' core. The draft picks that Cronin has made and not traded to acquiesce Damian Lillard look like they could be something. But the hard part is still ahead. As a NBA executive once told me, when you remove winning from the equation, it's easy to do a good job. The Blazers have added winning back into the equation. It's going to get harder. Let's talk about that, because I think what Cronin has done is good work. I think he's done good work, and he's been rewarded for his good work, generally speaking. He's been rewarded for his good works with a new task. And that's not to tear down, but that is to build up. The next challenging steps are ahead of him, including who the hell coaches this team? Let's talk about that to close the show. Join me in the third segment, won't ya? First, though, let's talk about BetterHelp. Therapy can be incredibly valuable no matter what you are going through, because taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health. But traditional in-person therapy can often be expensive, ranging from $100 to $250 per session. That's where BetterHelp comes in. With online therapy, you get quality care at a price that makes sense, saving you time and saving you money. Therapy isn't just for life's toughest moments. It's not for acute traumas only. It's for just navigating everyday stress, learning how to set boundaries, developing positive coping skills, learning to meet yourself where you're at, and loving who you are in the moment, and having access to the support you need when you need it can make a big difference. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp. HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Still a Bass versus point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Cronin has done a pretty good job navigating out of the place where he started. I quite frankly, I think that the idea that Joe Cronin was handed this like absolute mess is so overblown. He was handed a very expensive roster. There's no doubt about that. But and it wasn't super balanced, but they were talented. That team should have made the playoffs. Dame got hurt, and it all went to hell, and Joe Cronin started trading folks and started tearing that thing down. But the roster's still pretty expensive, y'all. That hasn't changed very much. It's not like they're extremely cheap now. They got a bunch of players with big contracts, right? Like, I don't think that has changed. I think it's a little overblown that like Cronin was handed like the rawest deal in 2021. I think that's quite frankly, I think that's nonsense perpetuated by people who don't like Neil Olshey, and that's fine. You don't have to like Neil Olshey. I think that dude's kind of an a-hole myself, but I think it's a little bit much. I think in the Blazers space, Cronin's done a good job though of getting from there to here, and mostly he's done a good job recently because the teardown is relatively straightforward, right? Shed contracts, don't take back bad money, try to accumulate assets, but really just like get cheaper and get worse and lose basketball games and get to the top of the lottery. And Cronin did that. But I think that's the easy part, quite frankly. He's begun the hard part, which is not the tear down, it's the rebuild. And as I mentioned, the hard part is not the first steps of the rebuild. The first time you win 37 games, it hits like crack. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it hits like crack on the show, but now I've said it twice. I apologize. If you're a child listening, it hits like your first sip of a Slurpee on a cold July day. It's cold. It hits you right in the brain. It's freezing and good. The second time you win 37 games, you are drinking a Slurpee on the sidewalk outside of a 7-Eleven, and you're just doing some dirtbag stuff. The hard part is not getting to here. The hard part is getting to what's next. Once you add winning back into the equation, that's the challenge. And part of adding winning back into the equation is who's going to coach this team. Cronin now, and I think this is actually one of the, and I'll talk about this more in a future show. This is like something I should tease out more than spending 22 seconds on it right now. But like one of the challenges of the Blazers being kind of good just straight up competent the second half of the season and like having success is that now I think they're going to make moves to try to continue having success when maybe they shouldn't, right? Like maybe some of the best trades that they'll be offered will not offer them immediate success. And I think like they're a team that took a step forward and they probably don't want to take a step back. And I think the unwillingness to take a step back sometimes can be a problem with teams because you have to sometimes recognize that progress is not linear, but that's a conversation for another day. The Blazers are, because they have been competent for basically half a season, right? You're going to have, I guess, depending on how this week ends, the Blazers have 3 games remaining in the season. Like maybe it won't feel like a full 41 games, but to me, it's like I think they've been pretty darn good. They've shown they are a good defensive team for 41 games-ish. And they've, Denny looks like a piece, Tumani looks like a piece, some young guys, some of the other young players look like they could blossom into a piece depending on how high you think Shaedon Sharpe can grow and maybe your overall opinion of Scoot. But they're going to have to take steps forward, right? They're going to have to make moves to get better. And part of the moves to get better is who coaches this team. Chauncey Billups is entering a summer in which there is a team option to pick up the final year of his contract. I would just like the media literacy. The Blazers today announced a contract extension for one of the members, sort of the lead decision makers within the organization, who was rewarded for the success of the team by getting a new contract. That person wasn't Chauncey Billups, okay? So if you think like Billups is a lock to come back, Today would have been if you were going to say, like, we believe in the direction, the front office has got it, the coach has got it, we are moving forward. Today would have been the day to do it. All good vibes, a great good vibes day here on a Monday. You listen to Tuesday's show, they did it on Monday morning. They didn't do that. That, to me, and perhaps this will be a misread of things, and certainly I've misread plenty of things in the Cronin era. To me, that is a telling lack of an update. If you ain't gonna extend, if the Blazers were going to extend Chauncey Billups, today would have been a perfect and very reasonable day to do it. Align those extensions together. Guess who's got new contracts? Everybody, because we believe in the direction. So to me, and I've guessed this, what I've called educated guessing based on some conversations I've had, is like, I don't think Billups will be back next year with the Trailblazers. And based on how the news went down today, I still don't think he'll be back with the Trailblazers. So one of the big questions for Joe Cronin is who is going to coach the team? Billups was hired by Neil Olshey. He is the last remaining part of the Neil Olshey era to some extent, because even some other members who, some other folks who've been around the team since that era have moved on to different roles in various capacities. Billups is kind of the last remaining part of the Olshey era that's still hanging around that isn't Anthony Simons, and Joe Cronin gave Anthony Simons a $100 million contract to stick around. Simons' presence is specifically part of Cronin's legacy, right? I think who coaches the team is the hard part. I mentioned that I haven't always loved what Cronin has done, and part of my criticism of what Cronin has done pretty consistently is the lack of trading the veterans. And it's not just veterans, right? They're young. Anthony Simons is not yet 26, but it's like the more experienced players, I think Jeremy Grant's a veteran, but like the more experienced, higher priced players who seem to be increasingly, as the season has gone on, in the way of what is the Blazers' young core, guys who don't seem to be part of the long-term plan, who are around for a medium amount of time, which that has been a criticism. That is still the task. Are the Blazers able to trade Jeremy Grant? We'll see. Do they want to trade Anthony Simons, and what can they get for him? Are they able to trade DeAndre Ayton, or do they view him as part of the future? Because both him and Simons have been extension eligible since last summer and could sign new deals, with Ayton and Simons both heading into the final year of their deal, Grant with 3 left. Part of navigating from where they are to what's next is making the deals that they haven't in one way or another, either extending those guys and saying they're part of the core, which yikes, or like making trades and seeing what you can get from them. And some of my criticism of Cronin, my main criticism is inaction in those places. Certainly some of the action he has made has been very valuable, but the lack of action in other spaces has baffled me and continues to be somewhat mystifying as you look ahead to the future of the Blazers. While their future is bright, some of the decisions that they failed to make at last trade deadline and last summer still loom after this most recent trade deadline heading into this summer. And instead of having the luxury of saying you can just take back, you're allowed to trade for other experienced players. You don't have to trade for young players and draft picks. That's not how it works. But some of navigating what's next is now that the expectation is probably that they won't take a step back, right? Is that they'll continue to get a little bit better. So it's not a year where you can say, well, take a flyer on these guys and get some draft picks and see what happens, even if they're like second rounders or whatever. Now you kind of want, when you make these deals, when you look for these trades, it's like players who can help, bodies who can help you play, because the expectation, I believe, for the Blazers, because of their competency over this stretch of the season, second half of the year, has been that they look good enough that they should try to continue this path forward. Danny Avdija looks good enough to push him forward. Toumani Camara looks good enough to push him forward. If the young players continue to take steps in the right direction with Sharp and Scoot and DC, Donovan Clingan, then you've got a very a starting lineup that makes sense, and now you need other parts to push with it with your young core. The Blazers need probably other guard help to help them score. It used to be oops all guards, and now it's like, yeah, you could use another dude. You could use another guard. And that's the challenge that lies ahead for Billups, or for Cronin. He probably has to hire a new coach, and he still has to trade the veterans that he has not yet traded. And now the goal of the franchise, well, this year it seemed like, well, they're going to be one of the 5 worst teams in the league. They're just not that, right? They're very clearly not. Maybe in a bad way, but like again, like the point of basketball is to win. In my opinion, they probably should have lost like 5 to 7 more games this year and probably could have had a lot of the similar positive developmental outcomes while losing 5 more games, but they didn't do that. And because they didn't do that, and because the expectations have probably shifted, a little bit, at least the pendulum of expectations has shifted a little bit towards be competitive. Now, not only do you have to still make the trades that you haven't made in the past, but you have to make the trades while improving the roster forward. This is the hard part. The teardown is relatively simple because the expectations aren't that high. The early stages of the rebuild hit like an icy outside of 7-Eleven on a hot July day. That's Coke mixed with strawberry or red. That's probably what it is. Cherry. Mixed with cherry. That's a delicious beverage. If you go back the second time, you're just drinking empty calories. And I think that's the challenge, right? That first one, 64 glorious ounces. They made a delicious beverage. It's so fun. It's such a wonderful treat. But the hard part is doing it, is taking the next step, is graduating from icy to a whole nother level of beverage. And that's what lies ahead for Cronin. He's done a good job of navigating here. The really hard work is ahead of him. And now he has some comfort with a multi-year contract extension to really put his stamp on this thing. Not that he hasn't already, but now he has some space to, I don't know if it's take risks, because I think they've been relatively risk averse, kind of depending on how they've either been willing to take big risks or relatively risk averse, depending on which types of moves you look at, I think actually is the real truth about it. Depending on where you look at the moves. But the task is now to go from competent, competitive, consistently competitive, very real, like competent in a serious way to good, and good in the West, where it's really hard to be good. The hard work is just beginning, and now Cronin has been given the space to do that hard work, add winning back into the equation, and take the new challenge. Not a rebuild, but a build. That's going to do it for today's program. Got more shows coming for you the rest of the week. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about the Blazers youngsters. So we've seen a little bit of Ryan Rupert. I want to talk about him, plus some other players on the Blazers roster as we continue to look ahead to what is next with this team. On Wednesday evening, the Blazers play the Utah Jazz. We'll talk about that one when it happens on Thursday's show. Is what we do 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts. Also on YouTube. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.